Absolutely.
Hi, and everybody, welcome to the next installment of If It's in the Mind, It Can Be Managed, the Mind Management Mentors podcast. I'm your host, Cuddy Cudworth, Ryan, Penny, or Dr. Penny. I've
Just
actually introduced
Ryan.
you, and I don't normally introduce people. I'll let people introduce themselves. I'm going to class you as a big fish. A
I
big
think we're going to
fish.
have to decide that after the chat to see if we agree. But okay, let's see.
So there's a compliment. Now, the reason
Thank you.
and for everybody watching this, I'm a big believer, and that's something I always say at the beginning of every podcast that I do is, look, I'm a big believer in whatever, and I think it's more commonly used around the rest of the world, but I don't think it's as commonly used in the UK at the moment. But the businesses that I'm working with are understanding the value of coaching. It's big in America. You are in Dubai. So before
Yep.
we actually introduce you and let you go off on your tangent, you're working in Dubai. You are South African from descent, I do believe. You are South
Yes.
African.
Yes.
So we'll talk about that journey how you got into. But this podcast is all about workplace wellness. It's all about helping coaches understand how they can market their business, and it's also about coaches talking about how they became coaches and things like that with mindset and mental health.
Cool.
And I know that we're in the same space. I would definitely say that you are in a higher echelon than me, as a very open and fair
You're
statement.
guessing. You're guessing at that. You
I
can't be
am
sure
guessing, but if you're
yet.
working for
Let's
the,
see.
the business that we're going to talk about now, I'm not working in that area of business yet, being the operative word.
Good man.
This podcast, I think, is going to be extremely beneficial and powerful for businesses looking to keep their leaders and employees, because the businesses that I work with the staff all the way up to the leaders.
Right.
And I've had people say, "Well, how is it I can work with the staff all the way up to the leaders?" I said, "Because I've actually got experience on every level,
Yeah.
so
Makes
I
sense.
know the differences because I worked at Royal Caribbean as a cruise director, so we
Right.
worked at that high level
Okay.
with captains. That's how I know James Andrews, and James
That's how you
Andrews
know
used to,
James.
yes, absolutely. So look, that's the opening monologue of this podcast. Dr. Penny, not Perry, as you think I've been saying. Introduce yourself. Tell us what you do and welcome to the podcast.
Well, thanks, Cuddy. Yeah, it was James, I think, who had communicated with you, and then you communicated with me. And I actually sent James a message yesterday to say, hey, thanks, appreciate that. So I think we've come full circle. Um, so I was born in Pretoria, South Africa. I'm currently 51 years old, married to a wonderful wife, Bronwyn. I have three beautiful daughters, 19, 16, and 13. Donna, Hannah, and Kelsey. And we've been in Dubai now on the 29th of September, will be 20 years. We
Wow,
came
that's a
for
long
a
time.
2 year stint that just kept getting extended. And I came initially with my brother to work in an integrated medical facility where Sean, my brother, and I were basically opening a section on the complementary and alternative medical side. So we came in 2005 and pretty much worked with that particular company for that clinic for about 5 years. And then in that time, I'd been in practice since mid 2000 or mid 1999, and I'd been doing a lot of sort of general family health and well-being. So really treating your everyday colds and flus and things like that from a complementary and alternative sort of angle, however, with a very clinical approach. So it's a little bit of a bridge between conventional and complementary medicine. When I came to Dubai, it didn't take me long to realize that probably the thing that I could offer the most support the area was in lifestyle change, because obesity and diabetes were such massive problems. So as a part of that clinic, I developed an entire transformation system. And as a part of, so the idea was there were so many things coming around in that sort of period between 2005 and 2010. People were offering, like a 30-day transformation or an 8-week transformation. And what I was looking at is I was saying, hang on a second, a short-lived transformation program is not the same as training in transformation. So what I started doing is I started saying, well, let me try and help people understand how they think and understand nutrition and understand movement and understand rest and understand supplementation and other sort of therapeutic interventions, which really relates to how do I build a lifestyle that is transformative in terms of what I have as an outcome. So I would spend time, an hour with person saying, let me just show you what's happening in mind and brain. And I would spend an hour with them saying, let me explain to you, here's my take on nutrition. As a part of my qualifications, I'm a clinical nutritionist. So then I was working on that and conditioning and everything. And what I noticed was the people who really bought in strongly on the mindset side were the people who developed the self-control and self-regulation to do, in essence, what they already knew worked. So what we found was there was already enough information at that particular point in time in relation to how does one eat better, how does one move better, how does one sleep better, and that kind of thing. What we were finding was the bridge between what people knew and what people were doing was missing. So really, it was a matter of how do we help people develop the kind of compliance to what's required to be healthy mentally, emotionally, physically, and relationally. And that's when I started doing a lot of work on understanding self control. And I spent a tremendous amount of time working with individuals. It's interesting when you work with somebody who in the sphere of weight management, you realize that struggles with weight are so representative of struggles in most areas in life, right? These are
Mm.
usually people who are successful in certain areas of their lives. They've achieved academically. They're holding positions in business. They have relationships, and yet they have the sense they have no self-control. And I would always explain to them that that's not actually true. If you look at what you've accomplished, that requires a tremendous of self-control. What you lack usually is the self-control in a particular area, because I think we're approaching the understanding of what's happening motivationally in a way that is not helpful. So I'll throw it out right at the beginning. I think a goal is a horrible motivator. And
I
normally when I
agree,
say
actually.
that,
Goals are shite sometimes. Yes.
100%. So when I say that to most people in and around that time, people were saying, but I thought to be successful, I have to have these smart goals and I have to, come
Smart
up with
goals, I
all of
remember.
these brilliant plans and I need to dream big and think whatever, I can achieve whatever I want. And I was trying to bring it back down to, we live in a world of cause and effect. If you want a different outcome, you're going to have to approach it differently. And again, that's going to come down to how do you manage yourself? So I built this system really around what is considered a competing neural theory or neural circuit theory. So the idea would be, okay, I've got these two competing neural circuits. One we would term loosely sort of prefrontal cortex, and the other one limbic system. And I was trying to show people how what happens within the brain is you've got these two things trying to make a case, and I did it as a courtroom setting, a case for what's best. And the reality is, whichever of those systems shouted most loudly and were most convincing, the mind would typically go ahead and follow in terms of that's best.
Right. So
Right.
I've got a feeling if I don't jump in with a question,
Yes,
you're going to talk for hours, which is brilliant. And I love that.
I can, but I'd like not to. So jump in.
Perfect. So and it's funny, James Andrews has just messaged me on WhatsApp. How did your conversation go with Dr. Penny? Right. So what you're saying there is, and to break this down, because that was super smart, and I was like, right, I'm definitely in on this. And especially as me being a big guy who's successful in certain areas, but yes, I struggle with food. I absolutely
Right.
struggle with food.
Right.
You said the neural pathway connections is whichever is screaming the loudest, the nervous system, which is the somatic,
Mm-hmm.
or
I would
the limbic, sorry, you said limbic,
limbic.
limbic,
Right.
which is the nervous system,
Part of it. Yes.
part of it, all the way to the back, and the prefrontal cortex, which is the logical side. So whichever is screaming the loudest gets the attention. Is that correct?
In principle, yes, but let me clarify. So,
Perfect.
as a part of this, what I'm saying is I developed a model so
Yeah.
that we could avoid the terminology of prefrontal cortex and limbic system and all the typical things. So, picture it like this. I would say to a person, imagine in your head you have a courtroom and your mind is the judge. Now, your mind has one single thing that it has to do, and this is in relation to what I call the fundamental drive of every human being. It's the purpose drive. And it means this: the judge's sole responsibility is to decide between these two lawyers, right? One of them will discuss the characteristics in terms of limbic, the other in terms of prefrontal, but we'll steer clear of that in any further description. The idea is I've got these two competing lawyers, two competing neural circuits saying this is best and this is best. And the judge is basically saying, whichever one I'm convinced is best, that's what we'll do. So the basis of choice comes down to that which is perceived to be most satisfying. So it's helpful then to understand it like this. And we'll talk it out. Imagine I'm sitting just with you, I'm sitting with somebody else, and I say to them, the way I would in the consulting room or in the boardroom, say to them, okay, if I said to you, every person is fundamentally motivated exactly the same way, am I right or wrong? What do you think most people say?
I would say wrong.
100%. And I'd say that's where you're wrong. Okay.
Perfect. Good.
And the idea is to simply say this: no matter how old you are, male, female, where you come from, no matter your age, the fundamental drive that is on 100% of the time, never switches off, is the pursuit and preservation of maximal satisfaction.
Happiness.
That's the
Yeah.
fundamental drive. In other words, it's on all the time. Now, the reason most people say you're wrong is because they're talking about a second tier motivation. So if I say to you, every person is in pursuit of the best possible from their perspective. Now, where the difference comes in is how people see what's most satisfying. So everybody, the person who's out trying to land something on Mars and the person who's lying under a blanket watching Netflix, smoking a cigarette and drinking a Coke, still have the identical, fully switched on pursuit and preservation of maximal satisfaction. So let's define satisfaction, okay? Most people, you ask them what they want, they say, I want to be happy. That's not enough. I want happiness. I want excitement. I would like freedom of choice. I would like to be in a position of control of myself and the other things around me so that I can do the things that I find satisfying. I would like to be able to be successful in my pursuits. I'd like connections with people that support me and that I feel I add value to. I would like to gain good and comfortable things. I would like safety and security. There's one thing I don't want. I don't want loss.
We don't like
Fundamentally,
loss, do we? Because we don't like loss.
it's the reason we don't like loss is because loss is the summary of that which gets in the way or indicates I'm failing in my pursuit and preservation of maximal satisfaction.
Pause. Stay
Pause.
right there, Mr.
Fine. Good.
Right.
By the time we're done, we'll have it all. But keep going. Yes.
Ah!
Pause.
So let's break this down even more simple because
Love it.
if it's simple, people will
It
get
is.
it. And more to the point, if it's simple, I'll get it. Ha!
If I can get it, it's simple.
Right. So what we're saying is, and is this a mindset switch, or is like, so if I come to you and say, look, I want to lose weight, you're going to want to
Yes.
know. So is that why we'll say, well, let's lose weight so that we can fit into the suit that doesn't fit? So that you're creating, so you're not worried about losing the weight because that's loss. You're not worried about stopping
Not the
eating,
same
which is
thing.
loss. Right. See, this is
Unfortunately, their loss is gain.
so that's why we're creating the preservation of happiness by saying, look at all the things you'll gain if you lose weight. So if you put the effort in to lose weight, these are all the things that you're going to gain. So you're now hitting that sense that everybody has of the never-ending search for happiness.
So 100%. But again, happiness is not enough, which is why we have to say, we have to, as a part of the model, expand and say, if everybody's fundamentally in pursuit of, let's keep it simple, the best experience possible, which is just a simple way of saying that, and everybody has their own perspective on what that looks like, it means I need to define perspective. And perspective is more than a point of view. Perspective is a construct of mind and brain that says, this is what I think the world is. So now I navigate this push pull to get what's best, to use my limited resources of time and energy and potential and information and money and help to try and somehow, through the process of choice, because I can't have it all at the same time, decide what's best. So to the example of the guy who's struggling with the weight. Now they come and they say, what's the goal? My goal is weight loss. And I say to them again, Well, let's achieve what you're looking to achieve, but best we understand that what's going to have to change is how you live, how you eat, and how you
Yeah.
move, and that kind of thing. In other words, weight loss is going to be a physical change in response to physiological change, which is going to come from different choices. And that's going to be tough. Why? Because the things that you like to do are the things that are giving you the outcome you don't like. And that's what we call the satisfaction paradox. I do the things I like to get an outcome I don't like, and I have to do the things I don't like to apparently get the outcome that I hope I will get. Now, that's why I say a goal is a problem, because the moment you add time, delay, and effort, in other words, work, to something, I do something now that I don't particularly feel like for an outcome that I may or may not get down the line, the brain says, that's not good satisfaction economics. Satisfaction economics says, I need to get as much as I can for as little as possible. And for me to forego the cheesecake right now, or for me to actually get up and go and gym rather than be comfortable on the couch, means that I have to forego what is a guaranteed satisfaction for something that I might not get. In fact, we've tried it 5 times before and we didn't succeed, so I won't buy that. The brain, in pursuit of maximal satisfaction, has the two competing neural circuits so that they can present to the mind, the judge, that which is perceived to be most valuable. Here's the problem. The part that relates to the prefrontal cortex, the area of executive function, I call future ultimate satisfaction seeker. That part is massively metabolically demanding. So in other words, I'll throw it out to you like this. If we put out a poll right now and we said to people who struggle with their weight, you're sticking to your diet, when do you typically break your diet? In the morning, late afternoon, or evening? What do they say?
Evening for me.
100%. Everybody. Why? Because that neural circuit, which is responsible for satisfaction now, which has no real consideration for future, is the one that's wide awake, and the one that's thinking about the future is fast asleep. So the brain is basically very loud in the area that says now is really the only thing that matters. So
This is
if
genius.
that's how it, if that's how it works, we're in big trouble if we don't know how to recruit that impulsive side to get to do the work required to give us the outcomes we're looking for.
I love it. I'm I'm
So,
I'm digesting everything.
and
Digesting
we're
what
going to
I'm
keep
going to
going round
do.
and round. I do not expect, you and I to go ahead and unpack what is 20 plus years that is kept on basically a single piece of paper. That's what I tease people about. For all of its complexity, it can be boiled down to basically a single sheet of paper so that we can really have an understanding of how it is that I can exercise the self-control and self-regulation to do what's needed to be successful. And it all comes down to what goes on in there, and you're spot on when you lead in with the way you lead in.
Because I really want to deep dive that again because I cannot eat all day. Does not bother me at all. But come 5 o'clock
Yeah.
to 8 o'clock, I'm like, right, all the rules are off.
So let me unpack it for you along the
Perfect.
lines. Again, it's because we're dealing with something that has a tremendous amount of depth. Okay. And the intention at the end is to present it in a very simple way. If we take something complex and oversimplify it, we're not going to get the richness of what's there. If we dive deep and come out and say, I don't need to cling to the depth to use this, I can use it in a simple way, that's the goal. But it is interesting to dive. Okay. So here's the deal. Picture it again. When we are born, okay, the brain is pretty much developed in terms of the neurons that are present, 80 to 90 billion neurons. The brain, however, the same as the rest of the body, is immature. So it needs to grow. And the way in which the brain grows is simply, in terms of understanding and growing perspective, is every single sensory signal that is received through what we see, hear, smell, feel, taste is going in and leaving an impression
Yeah.
on the brain to start giving a sense of this is the world you live in. So signals are coming from outside to the tune of a million a second.
Yeah.
And you've got babies who are forming neural connections, to the tune of a million or 2 million a second. So what we realize is this massive, massively complicated, complex desire of the brain to try and understand where am I, who am I, and how is it that I basically navigate this pursuit of being satisfied. Now, as that develops, you've got these two competing neural circuits that develop at different rates. So the limbic system, loosely, is the one that's all about survival. It's the emotional side, and it's
Yeah.
on the go immediately. That's why a baby who's hungry cries. That's
That's
why a
the first
baby
to react. The limbic system's
that
always first to
pure
react.
survival,
Yes.
pure survival, and instant gratification. It's doing nothing in terms of the calculation. Well, if I do this now, this is going to happen in 6 months. If we were functioning purely on limbic system, that's what we would say. We do not consider consequence or future reward. We function purely in the face of what is good now. Now, the other component, which is the one that's a little slow to develop and learn, is really only fully developed by the mid to late 20s, which is why, in many respects, as we are gathering more information, so we're starting to develop a better understanding of causal association. In other words, I do this and this happens a day from now, a week from now, a month from now, years from now. But that part of the brain, as I said, is taking a long time to develop. It needs to be rightly informed, so it needs to understand cause and effect in real terms, not what suits me. And then it needs to make sure that it is sufficiently fueled and energized to be present when we are confronted with the temptation in the evening. So I've had a long day at work. I've had to smile when I don't feel like smiling. I've had to hold my tongue when I didn't feel like holding my tongue. I've had to do a whole lot of things that I didn't particularly feel like. I had to exercise the self-control, which depletes brain resources for subsequent acts of self-control. So I might have been brilliant in relation to my boss or in relation to other people, but by the time I get home, the brain gas tank is done. Now I'm confronted with an instant satisfaction, and the part that's thinking the consequence down the line is fast asleep. So now
It's
we look and
knackered
we
because
say,
it's been working all day.
absolutely. And now it doesn't have a voice in the courtroom. And the judge is saying, well, I can only deal with what's presented, right? So
So he's
guess what's
listening to the
presented?
lawyer that's saying, get satisfaction now. Just go and eat that chocolate
100%.
bar.
Because in that moment, with only that voice, that makes the most sense. Now, if there's the faint voice of the other one that says, hey, but it's going to turn out badly, then the loud one says, well, don't worry about it. We'll just work out twice tomorrow. So the idea is it's got quick comeback
It's a
for
convincing
any
lying
argument.
bastard.
Now, here's something important. It is convincing and it can be deceptive. But the important component is, and this is where oftentimes a mistake is made when we look at things. I've got angel, I've got devil, I've got black wolf, white wolf. These are the other descriptions of what I'm
The
describing
lights
as
and the
it relates to
shadows, absolutely. The shadow
100%.
work that we have to do,
What
yes.
we need to understand is that it's not a moral difference. Both want what's best, both want what's best from their perspective. So it's not that one is trying to trick you. One is trying to do everything it can to try and tell you this is best from its perspective. Okay? So the point is simply this: the morality, ironically, conscience and that kind of thing, is an integrated function. It's a thoughtful and an emotional one. And that's why when, we're confronted with having to do something wrong, like really wrong at night, we might still, even in a depleted state, say, yeah, that's not who I am. I'm not going to do that. And we find ourselves exercising self-control when we are completely depleted. And the reason being is because the switch has occurred. The part that's fighting for me is the very same part that wants the impulsive satisfaction. We can discuss more of that later, but that is the key to understanding super self-control right there. Bottom line, we're impulsive when we are fatigued. We're impulsive when we have things in front of us that are so convincing that in many respects we can justify doing simply because they're guaranteed satisfactions. That part of my brain that has to say no to that, again, it's going to have a very, very good argument that I'm going to really have to buy into in order to go ahead and help me exercise the self-control. And that doesn't typically happen.
So this has been absolutely mind-blowing. And thank you so much. Seriously, I
Cool.
think when we get that picture painted into our minds, I'm like, yeah, that makes total sense. So the limbic system is the monkey mind. That's the way I've always talked
The
about the
ways
limbic
in which it's
system.
been described. Yes.
It's the easiest way, it's our emotions. So if our emotions are not getting satisfied or they've been pushed around all day long, you're the lawyer who's in charge of your emotions has been in charge all day. It's not let you lash out at your boss. It's like said, yeah, you're gonna go to the gym. Yeah, you're not gonna eat that after pudding thing. And then when you get home and you just sit down and you are tired, it's like the conversations start, isn't it? The conversations go round and round, which is why a lot of people say, why is it when my head hits the pillow, it's like the
Yes.
floodgates are opened up and everything that's happened to me in the past 6 months, a year,
Yeah.
boom, comes through. Or I'm constantly overthinking. So we haven't, that's the limbic system.
Again, let's work with that for the moment because there are a
Yes.
couple of things in there that we probably need to define more carefully. But let's work with that part as being it's simply this. It's the part of the brain that's heavily emotional and interested in satisfaction now.
Perfect. Now, a quick, I was going to say a quick fix, but you don't like a quick fix.
I
So
don't mind a quick fix if it works.
a hack. You were saying you were talking with a lot of people, businesses, and I want the hack. Right.
Yes.
So now, me knowing that I eat more at night time and I'm not bothered in, I
Right.
mean, I'm technically fasting this morning because I
Right.
I know you're in Dubai and I'm here, in Scotland. I know that I've got certain foods that's going to be coming along later, and I'm like, yeah, I'm happy not to eat in the morning. I've had cups of tea and
Sure.
coffee this morning and things like that.
Yeah.
Um, what's the solution to quieten that lawyer? What's the solution? So somebody
Okay.
walks away from it now, they're going, well, actually, now I know how to quieten that.
Right.
What's the solution for somebody that knows that their lawyer is going to be noisier from 6 till 9 o'clock at night?
Right. So the simplest thing to do in that particular case is create an environment for success. In other words, self-regulation. In other words, when the people want to walk by with the food that I have to say no to, please ask them not to walk by. So what I'm basically saying is the first thing you can do is create an environment that does not feed that part of the brain to shout out, hey, that might be nice. Hey, that might be good. So the more I can do that's in line with what I need to do to be successful in whatever my pursuit is, that does not rely on self-control, the better prepared I am for later part of the day. Now I will carry that over into the when I get home. Well, there's nothing new here. Make sure that it isn't in the fridge. Make sure it isn't in the cupboard. When you went shopping, make sure you weren't hungry. All the kinds of things. So that's on a self-regulation side. In other words, I'm creating an environment to make sure that when I am going to have that competing battle in my head, I'm not going to fall into the trap. That's number one. Number two, I'm going to basically find a better reason to say no to the things I feel like doing later. And this is when I love to play a game with people. So, you married?
Yes.
Okay. Do you, oh, let's just rephrase. Do you have somebody who you really, really love?
Yes.
Okay. Now imagine, and this is purely hypothetical, it's no manifestation of anything here. Imagine I said to you, Cuddy, if you go ahead and you eat this tonight, all the stuff you know you feel so guilty about afterwards, if you do one of those things, the person you love dies. Would you go and eat them? Would you go and eat the things that you normally struggle with? Would you have any
I'm
difficulty?
not even thinking about it, but I was deciding on who's the person I love the most, whether it's my dog or my wife.
Right. So here's the point. Pick either one. Here's what I'm trying to show you, a proof of principle. What I might have been absolutely straining to restrain myself from eating whatever it is or whatever it is that I needed to go ahead and do, I simply add a big enough reason. In other words, I say to you, okay. And again, this is proof of principle. This is hypothetical. If you knew that if I ate this thing that's not part of my plan,
My wife
this
died.
person dies. Would I ever eat that thing? And that's where you
Absolutely
careful with
not.
how you answer it. Of course, absolutely not. Then I would say to you, how difficult would that decision be?
Super easy.
It's a no-brainer. Why? Because instantly I've basically turned the one lawyer that is my impulsive one, I've taken the restraining executive function one, which is so fatigued, who's out of the picture. I've taken him out of the picture. And I've incorporated a motivational component, a perspective component that runs on the one circuit that is loudest. How would I ever choose to do something like eat something at the expense of somebody who I love so much? That's not the executive function functioning. That is me with my instant satisfaction. Why? Because if I ate right now, they die right now. I don't have to think about how long it takes or anything else. When it comes to ourselves and our own goals, that time delay, if that's what I'm going to use, it's my goal down the line. Well, that lawyer that says no now counts will eat that alive. So the point is simply, how do I answer your question? Self-regulation, super self-control. How? By having a good enough reason not to do what I feel like doing.
This is kind of how hypnotherapy works, isn't it? Because it's talking to the subconscious, which is it kind of sucks. I had hypnotherapy once, and I remember what the hypnotherapist was saying to me was, if you eat this, you're going to die. You're going to get, and it was giving that irrational reason to
Mhm.
that conversation, wasn't it?
Well, no, I would say to they don't actually relate at all. In many respects, what I mean by that is this is a conscious choice. If I forget, okay, now it's in the subconscious because the subconscious is the mind's blind spot. It means it's happening outside of my attention zone.
Yes.
So you might be trying to feed information into the subconscious that you hope is going to be factored into my decision making. I'm saying, no, no, you need to be clear on what the consequence is if I choose to eat this. Now, if I forget that my wife was going to die when I ate this, I'd eat it. So I can't leave it in the subconscious. I need to make sure it's right there in front of me so that I can see that what I'm about to do is going to produce an outcome that I really don't want. So it's not subconscious at all. It is very, very much be clear and conscious of the choice that you're making. But instead of it being a battle, it is a no brainer because the advantage of one over the other is so big. And that's what we call a good enough reason.
So I have a question now then.
Yes. Cool.
Knowing that if I eat that thing that my wife is not going to die, would
Yes.
that not be the instead of the conversation that would argue with that lawyer going, yeah, it's all right saying that, but we know that she's not going to die if I eat that food?
100%. I used it as a proof of principle. I didn't use it as a means to benefit myself, right? So you're 100% correct. Remember, that part of the brain, miss my immediate satisfaction seeker, that limbic impulsive now type, it's looking to try and satisfy you. It's not looking to lead you down the wrong path. It simply is so short-sighted that it's trying to say to you, hey, listen, this is the best thing on offer right now. And it believes it so strongly that it makes the case so forcefully that if the other one, which is usually the restraining component, isn't present, it just means that, okay, well, we go with this because this makes the most sense. So the irony is, even when we deviate from our plan, it's either a matter I've forgotten what my plan is or the reason to follow it, or it's a matter of, I don't have a good enough reason with where I currently stand. In other words, with what I can currently see. Now, again, this is where this one, I like what you said earlier, it's deceptive. This is where it plays, well, we can have the best of both worlds. Because I tell you what, let's eat this now, okay? And we'll start again on Monday. But what we'll do is, and it gives this elaborate plan as how we're going to be super strict and we're going to end up enjoying now and succeeding down the line. And guess what? That's maximal satisfaction in play. How can you argue with that? Well, I can give you a good reason why that doesn't work. But the point is, that's the level of reasoning and argument that that part of the brain levels when you've got an instant satisfaction in front of you, even if it's not part of the plan.
That's absolutely, as you're talking, I'm sat going, I could actually start implementing that. I could literally start saying, if you eat that, your wife's going to die. Or if you eat
Now,
that, your dog's going to be unhealthy. I can see that as a really good argument for myself.
Now you need to understand this. Remember, the moment you offer an obstacle like that to the brain in pursuit of maximal satisfaction, it's going to be, as any good lawyer, try and find a loophole. So the reality is, I'll give you other ways at the end that are more reliable, because I promise you, you'll do that for 2 or 3 or 4 days and you'll be amazed as to how successful you'll be. And then all of a sudden your brain will say, but she's not going to die and one's not going to hurt.
Because the question I was going to ask is then do we not start creating an irrational fear and then a possible
That's
phobia?
exactly what we don't want to do.
We
That's
don't
why
want
I
an
say,
irrational fear of food and an irrational fear of phobia, because if we
no.
start getting in the thought loops, our brain and mind starts thinking it's real, and then we start becoming towards the
100%. And
yes.
that's why I basically summarize it like this: keep it real, keep it simple, keep it thoughtful, and keep it going. Fundamentally, that's what it comes down to. So the last thing I want to do is play with reframing. I don't want to reframe something, because to reframe an idea, oh, my wife's going to die, that's a reframe. That's me making causal connections that aren't true. Now, it might panic me, ironically, in the moment to think, oh, my goodness, you don't even want to think that, and who knows. So that'll work for a little while. But soon my logic is going to tell me, well, there's no connection there. So what I want to make sure is that the connections that I make, they are true, they are real, and there's no getting around them. And that is going to come from a couple of other things, not necessarily the one I used as an example.
That was apps, and I know we've got so much more to talk about because that's actually not the reason I brought you on the podcast. To be
You
fair,
almost can't discuss the other things without this understanding.
but that's absolutely amazing. I really like that. So, in the 20 years you've been in Dubai, how much have you seen that I was in Dubai with James Andrews actually. And it was a fascinating place.
It is.
It was
It
still
really
in the
is.
growth area, and that was probably about 8 to 10 years ago I was in. So, what changes have you seen in Dubai in the past 20 years? What have you seen for the changes in Dubai for health? Because, as far as I understand, because of the country and the religion over there, they don't believe in therapy. I might be
That is
completely
changing
wrong.
dramatically. That
Good.
really is changing dramatically. So what you'll find is that, yeah, it had a stigma, I'd say, when
It
I
was a
first
stigma,
came.
wasn't it? Yes.
It was a stigma associated, if you've got to go to a psychiatrist or you've got a child with some disability or something like that. I'm generalizing,
Yeah.
but the general idea was that's not something you want to make public, and that's not something you want to go ahead and make use of. There was a conflict there. Well, I would say to you that Dubai at the moment is so progressive
Yeah.
in the area of corporate wellness. In fact, it released something 2 or 3 weeks ago stating that every company has the responsibility to make sure that mental and emotional health is a high priority for every single one of the employees. So I would say to you that they are actually now, as typically Dubai does, it identifies an area that it can improve on, and then it says, well, we need to be the best in the world at this. And we're seeing that playing out in the area of health and fitness. We're seeing that playing out in the area of mental health and sort of corporate social responsibility. So it's there very strongly, very different from what it was
Oh,
before.
wow.
Yeah.
That's now me making me think, right, who do I need to speak to in Dubai to get prior to my management in there?
Yeah.
I'm thinking, right, I'm going to start going through LinkedIn for all the HR managers in
Yeah.
Dubai. I'll get them on a podcast.
And there's still, again, and just because there is such a willingness to a recognition of the need for these things means that it's a field that is currently wide open. And
Yes.
it is open to beyond, let's say professionals in the area of psychiatry or psychology or any other of those therapies. It really is a matter of, again, we don't need to understand all the ins and outs. What we've got to be able to present is something doable. So here's something that I'm sure will come up a lot. Everything that I try and aim at is low friction. In other words, I try and help people implement things that are not going to be difficult for the very reasons I've just explained. Now, it might mean that we need to understand things at a certain level to understand what's friction and what's not.
Yeah.
And I would say to a person, you are much better off implementing a plan D that you can do consistently than a plan A that you do sporadically. And the
Yes.
simple fact is this is meet people where they're at, recognize the load they carry is, monumental, and that loads them in such a way that they are so inclined to be in a survival kind of mode. Well, which part of the brain is dominating that? We've
So,
already
yes,
discussed,
absolutely. It's the limbic system for
which
survival.
is
Yeah.
why you have so many people under the pressure in sort of a corporate setting or just a family setting, any setting really, where there is high pace, high demand of people who are living with a sense of feeling stuck, with a sense of I'm just living day to day, pure survival. And then when you described, I put my head on the pillow and everything comes rushing in. Well, there's a whole other reason for why that happens, which I'd be happy to discuss because it's an important component. But the bottom line is when we are living without sufficient rest, without sufficient understanding of how things are working, we are surviving and we're doing it poorly. And that's what's leading to burnout and breakdown.
And it's I think businesses seem to be coming around to the idea that that high pressure environment, if you're constantly flooding your body and your system with cortisol, that is going to have a massive, massive effect. Just pause on that one for a second. So when we're talking about flooding our system full of actually kind of feeds into what we've been talking about anyway, because your if your body's completely burnt down and stressed out because of the amount of stress that we're creating, and I'm a big believer that a lot of the stress that we have comes from the beliefs that we have. So even if we change our
100%.
beliefs, we
100%.
we can change the outcome. So we can change the way that we think, we can change the way we feel. However, and I know this comes from Bruce Lipton, that like the simple part of Bruce Lipton, I'm a big fan of the biology of belief. But
Mhm.
if you've got a business structure where people are stressed and in a heightened sense of fear and worry, that attacks their entire nervous system, their physiological states. So we are now getting into a place. I saw something in the UK that was like one of the biggest investments for the UK businesses that want to thrive has to be a what was the actual word that it was? It was not just a wellness, but it was the what was the word? Holistic approach to wellness within the business structure, because you will
Right.
get a bigger return on investment, which is everything that we do with the trainings and the coachings that we do for businesses, is how, because everyone is stressed and stress is not going anywhere. Let's be honest. But if going back to the point of we've been talking about is that when we're stressed and tired and knackered, our judge is going to be listening to the self-preservation more and saying,
You just
screw
nailed
it.
it. You just nailed it. That's exactly what's happening.
That li So at least you know we're on the same level. Now you're like, all right, can you get it? That's fine. Because I'm
No,
like, yeah.
100%. I knew you'd get it. I mean, to be honest with you, I know that, as I said to you, we'll dive deep and we'll come back and then it'll be straightforward.
So we're now looking because this is where we get into the point of the podcast where I'm like, right, we need a really good title for this podcast because this is the one that people are going to want to watch and learn for the why a holistic wellness is going to make a massive difference to within that business structure. This is because that conversation of seeking pleasure is going to be louder. So you're going to start and start creating that negative voice and going, fuck it, I'll go and have that chocolate bar, or I'll go and have that drink, or I'll go and have that cigarette, whatever, because we're not helping to. So you want people less tired, is basically what we're saying, because you are more
Well,
in control when you're less tired.
so let's apply something practical to that. Whenever a person says to me, I'm struggling with something, I simply say, never make big decisions at night.
Yes.
And there's the reason.
Don't,
That's the
yes.
reason. So sleep on it. Why? Because again, your perspective is distorted in a state of fatigue, in a state of frustration, in a state of anxiety. Anything that is emotionally high, picture it like this: you just pumped the gas into the courtroom. Okay. So the courtroom is there. Now
Mm.
I'm hot headed, right? I'm emotionally, or I've got the stuff that's coming in. And guess who's most sensitive? The area of higher cognitive function, fuss. So fuss is so, oh, hang on a second. I need to sit down. I mean, there's something in the room here. And Mrs. like, man, bring it on because I'm about survival. We'll push through absolutely everything. Eat that chocolate bar, watch that TV program, can that gym thing. You're never going to succeed anyway. So why not? That kind of reasoning is happening because the brain believes in that moment that's the best thing on offer. It just happens to be wrong.
And if the brain's tired, it's just going to make bad decisions.
100%. So you think about it, the only reason we have to make decisions, okay, I alluded to it a little earlier. I said we've got this concept of satisfaction economics. If I'm wired in pursuit and preservation of maximal satisfaction, it's that little infinity sign. I always want something more, more. Okay. But I'm limited with the things that I mentioned earlier. I now have a tension. I want as much as I can get, as I said earlier, for as little as I can give. Because guess what the brain hates? Waste. The brain hates waste. So why would I let the last chocolate go out of the bag? It's just a waste because I'll start again on Monday. So you realize that the arguments that are happening internally, again, ironically, are with the intention of achieving the same goal, maximal satisfaction. But the biology in the brain gives a different perspective, and one of those circuits functions non-stop, and the other one is a little bit of a weakling, and it's a problem.
I love it.
Me
It
too, actually.
yeah. I mean, it makes total sense, and yeah, no, I do understand it because I know that that's it's kind of what we're doing that because you actually do performance. It's not just the health and wellness. You actually do coaching within. So you work. And actually, we never touched on this. So it's like, right, why should I listen to Dr. Penny? Well, Dr. Penny works for the Atlantis hotels and resorts in Dubai.
I consult them, yeah, thankfully. Lovely people, wonderful group.
And you do coaching with their staff leaders and the leaders. How whereabouts within the structure do you work?
When I started, and you and I spoke about this just briefly off air, I was basically approached by the then president of Atlantis Group, Tim Kelly, and he said to me, "Listen, we've got Atlantis, the Royal opening. You know, we've got Beyonce coming. We've got all of these. It has to just be this massive, massive event, and I've got the right team." I think at that stage it was about 16 VPs, senior VPs, and he basically said, "I've got the right team, but really the demands are such that it's there is so much pressure. I need you to come alongside and make sure I don't lose any of them along the way in terms of burnout, in terms of breakdown." So I was spending full Fridays with them, and I would spend an hour with each and every one of them, right? So every 2 weeks or so, I would get through the entire team. So I
Hmm.
worked with them, and the idea was to meet them where they were at. So the intention wasn't, let's see if we can improve your performance. You're dealing with the best in the world. These people know what they're doing. Nobody's going to tell them how to do their jobs. It's can we help them process and manage themselves and manage their families back home and manage their relationships in order to make sure that they can maintain the momentum of delivering this phenomenal launch. So I started with them then, and as I say, I was working with about 16 of them. And what started happening was they would say, "Okay, we've worked on things. I feel like I'm in a pretty good place, but I've got this manager or this director or somebody reporting to me who's really struggling. I'm going to give them my slot." So what ended up happening was a lot of the guys would start giving slots to their sort of, one tier down. And then this year they actually said, "You know what, why don't we add an extra week? And now we
Mm.
give 8 slots to directors and managers." So currently I'm working with from the president, the new president now, from the president through the VPs, through to the directors and some of the managers. And it literally is a one-on-one. And let me commend Atlantis here
Yeah,
because of
absolutely.
how they approached it. They basically said to me, "Ryan, okay, we know you. We know what you do in terms of holistic, how you think, how you eat, how you rest, how you move, how you supplement, how you support those things. We know that you can deal with that on a relational, personal side. We know you can do that on a professional side. Wherever they are at," I said to them, "I will meet them." So the idea was they gave me no mandate other than make sure you look after my team. And I'm
Yes.
like, number one. Number two, at no point, and this again, I even say to the people who come and see me for the first time within the group, because people change and new people come and that sort of thing, was nowhere does anybody in HR and speak highly of them come to me and say, Ryan, um, what's happening with this person, with that
Yeah,
person,
they
or with
never
the
do.
other? They basically say to me, here's the deal. How's my team doing at best? How they're looking after. And Atlantis does that, and another group that I work with, a sort of a leisure and entertainment group, Solutions Leisure. Those are the two main companies I work with here. And they have been so good in saying to their staff, we are giving you this as a gift in many respects. Use it as you want to. We are not here trying to take, sort of notes of, oh, so what he said this and we said this. It doesn't happen. Now, that obviously requires a certain amount of trust from those guys who are giving me that responsibility. But thankfully, I've worked with all of them as well to know that in essence, we have one goal. And that one intention is make sure the people who work for you are able to function as well as they can and actually, as far as possible, enjoy the process, which is not always enjoyable. But can we really make it something meaningful for them that, again, when they get home fatigued, we've been talking about, I get home, I ate something, I watched something. Well, how did you speak to your wife? How did you speak to your kid? Did you kick the dog? Right?
Yeah.
How did you do those things? Because those things are also impulsive responses to protect yourself in many respects from additional load or demands of you. Now, it's unacceptable, but the reality is, it's sort of understandable. Understanding something doesn't justify something. And that's where we look at it and we say, if we understand it and it's not justifiable, well, then we've got something to do about it. So again, the teams that I work with, hats off to their senior management for approaching the management of their staff the way they do.
I remember working with a business that I only worked with the executive leaders, and then after about 4 sessions, they're all like, "Oh, my team could do with this." I was like,
Right.
"Yeah," and then it got passed down within the rest of the team
Yeah.
structure. And
Beautiful.
it really is. And I always say the reason mind management, because we're not counselors, we're not therapists,
No,
but we do have a certain knowledge of how the brain works. And without saying we're a neuroscientist or we are life coaches or we just have the skills to understand the power of their beliefs, the power of their emotions, and the actions and the subsequent outcomes of those thoughts and beliefs.
100%.
And that's
I want to
that's
touch on
mind
something
management.
you said because I am so in support of that. Nobody changes what they do unless they change what they believe. That's
Yes.
as simple as that. So
Yes.
when even in your statement, if you can sort of, if it's in your mind and you can change your
It
mind,
can be
say
managed.
that for me again. It's such a good
If it's in the
statement.
mind, it can be managed.
100%. So now how one manages it, that's an entirely different story, right? But the bottom line is when I recognize that in many respects what's going on in there, and again, you and I could probably sit for weeks and discuss these things and enjoy them. We are not, again, as you said, psychiatrists,
Nope.
psychologists, neuroscientists, but we have enough of a, let's call it a working knowledge of the impact of belief, not to try and get people to believe what isn't true because it feels good or sounds good. Remember what I said, keep it real. What we're trying to do is recognize that belief is simply something somebody considers to be factually accurate. That's all a belief is.
It doesn't matter if it is real or not. The fact of the half the lies that we have going on in our heads, we still believe are real, whether they're true or not, which is manifestation,
100%.
really.
Well, again, if we believe something and we're wrong, and we apply that belief in reality, when our belief collides with what's real, I can tell you there's only one part that stands. Reality always wins, right? Reality always wins. So it's the onus is on us to say, let me align my beliefs with what is real so that I know what I'm dealing with, and then I can figure out how to deal with it. So this keep it real, this perspective alignment, which is what I refer to consistently. You might not like reality. There's things about reality I don't particularly like. Here's the bottom line: reality doesn't care. Reality doesn't have an ear for you. Reality says, I'm marching on because this is how it is. You're welcome to join me on the path, or you're welcome to get in my way, and I promise you I will steamroller you, and I'm not going to feel anything about it. Now, when we understand reality, we're able to then identify, well, what is the brain looking for? It's looking for opportunity and it's looking for threat. I want to know, am I rightly identifying what's a threat of loss? And am I rightly identifying what is a potential opportunity? And that is what the brain is trying to do all the time. So when I have my chocolate available at night that I shouldn't be eating because it's not part of my diet, the brain's like, that's a great opportunity right there. It's not thinking
And I've got chocolate
loss,
in my cupboard.
100%. And it's saying, you know what? That was there for a rainy day. Oh, I'm guessing in the UK it rains a lot. I'm teasing.
That's very good. No, I honestly, I mean, it's such a simple concept of understanding, and I do know I've got a good grasp of a lot of things, but there's always like that opportunity for us to learn more and go, that's
I
even
love
more
it.
simpler.
What did you
So when
just
I'm
do?
go on.
Ah, that is that beautiful concept of realization. Aha. That is the only way we change belief, through realization. If it's information that's coming that I know nothing about, I can embrace it and then I can try and reason through and see if it's factual, check the source, etc. But aha means I used to think this, but now I realize, and this is the truth. It's one of the most beautiful experiences that we have.
And that's what we do. Well, that's what I do with coaching is help people realize that belief of what they thought was real. If you look at it from a different perspective,
Yes.
actually now you've got a different truth. The second you align with that new truth, your entire nervous system flushes out and goes, right, I'll accept that. And that can be quite draining, but that can be quite, but it is how we grasp onto the perspective on how we were made to feel. And if it caused us so much pain, and we don't want to relinquish that pain because of the things that we've done in our lives, and maybe bad medical things have happened to us because we didn't want to let go of that truth, it can be hard to relinquish that truth, can't it? Because if
Well,
that
if you
truth has created a reality of absolute misery, homelessness, drug abuse, sexual abuse, and all those kind of things, if that belief of who we were in those moments have created those outcomes, it can be hard for us to relinquish that belief because it causes all those things. Now, when we have a new belief system and we think, oh, now those things don't have to happen to us again, it can be quite a hard. It comes back to reality is going to slap you in the face and go, I know that's what you thought then. Now this is what you think now. Now you've got a different option.
So let's look at it like this. Again, the reason why people have the need to be right, in other words, along the lines of what you're saying, I used to believe this, but to
Yes,
relinquish this belief, right? Well, what do I stand to lose?
you have
Well,
to
the
admit
first
being
thing
wrong.
is I basically have to recognize it can be wrong. And that for some people is devastating, right? So when we understand that we want to be and believe we have to be right to be successful and to have a particular view of self, in other words, an image or an identity. If I have to realize that I was wrong, or I come to that realization and I see the advantage of the correction, I'll be happy to leave the thing I held on to. But if I am confronted with something that has to change and I am left with, well, if I was wrong, then what else am I wrong in? And now I'm starting to have massive self-doubt. Or if I relinquish that, then I don't have the justification for doing this, doing that, or anything else. Or if I forget that, then I'm vulnerable, and there are multiple reasons why a person will cling to something that is hurting them. Well, we look at that and we say, but that's a complete violation of that fundamental drive of the pursuit and preservation of maximal satisfaction. If we drive what is forceful with a poor perspective, we end up hurting ourselves. That's not self-sabotage. That is unfortunately mismanagement of self that ends up hurting us. Sabotage is I intended to hurt myself. Self destruction, getting in my own way, tripping myself up that I didn't do on purpose, that I did in pursuit of maximal satisfaction, is simply misguided. And that is a perspective problem. Now we're back to that's a belief issue. Best you change the belief. But here's the deal, you're entitled to your opinion and belief.
You
I
are,
will, I
absolutely,
will
yes.
never, ever tell a person you have to change your belief. I will say to them, if you hold to that belief, this is what you can expect. If you recognize that this belief in the face of this evidence is not accurate, you have the freedom to adopt what's real, and then you are positioned to decide what to do with it. And that's why I think your summary of the mind, the brain, if it's in the mind, you can manage it, is 100% correct.
This is fantastic. As we're talking about this, I know I've got a client tomorrow, and I'm like, right, I know what the session is now. Because,
Cool. Yeah, let me
yeah,
know how it goes.
it is. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, no, yeah. Yeah, because those beliefs and those perspectives come out in how we feel, and until we want to relinquish that pit, yeah, oh my God,
So let me paint this for you quickly because it is something helpful. I make this statement: perspective is everything. That's the statement I made.
100% perspective
Perspective
can
is
change
everything.
your life. Yes, perspective
Understanding
and
what
choice.
perspective. Well, you have the choice in many respects a lot more than you think. Person will say to me,
Correct.
I'm stuck. I'm stuck. I'm gonna say, well, if you decided to leave your job today, no, I can't do that. If somebody called you from the other side of the world who desperately needed you, this person, and you needed to be there and you loved them very much, what would you do? Well, I'd quit my job. Okay, so you can quit. The bottom line is the way your perspective is and the way you perceive things at the moment is, I can't. Well, that's one of the ways the brain locks you into a position while you're unhappy. And that's okay because you might have to do that. Life isn't all happiness and roses. Well, the reality is, if I'm able to process things in a way that doesn't have me feel stuck as a victim, I can say I'm in a difficult situation and I can choose to say I'm staying there. The whole biology, physiology changes because it's a change of perspective. Again, it's not a reframe, it's a different angle of the what's real. So when you start piecing these kinds of things together, and then you mention emotions, emotions, we talk, it's important to have good emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence just means this: I recognize what an emotion is, I read it for what it is, and I regulate it as it's needed. That's what emotional intelligence is, right? So we look at it and we say, do I have a level of self awareness to know what I'm feeling? And I say, start with good or bad, positive or negative. Well, the negative emotions are the ones we're normally paying attention to. Why? Because the good ones, I just want to keep coming. I don't have to need help with that, right? So the negative one, I'm
And the
simply
brain
saying,
only
okay,
recognizes negative because it has to keep itself safe.
say that again.
So the brain only recognizes the negatives. Anything that could have caused the brain pain, it has to start focusing on them to avoid them again because it's got that pleasure seeking. So it's like, oh, well, that could kill me. So I don't want to look for that. So I want to avoid it. So I create a perspective of only looking for the bad in my life so I can go this way. So right. So the brain's got to keep you alive. So any
The
bad
brain,
experience,
100%. And that's why most people, when we consider the perspective for most people, is more about risk aversion, what I stand to lose, than it is about pursuit, right?
yes,
We're looking at that and saying, so when a person experiences something negative, the negative emotion is supposed to impress that experience on the memory for the very reason you just described, so
yes,
that I'm high alert, so that I can avoid it and I don't have to go through the same thing again. Here's the problem:
you're
you
looking
feel
for it
what
all
you
the
think.
time.
You feel what you think.
Yes.
So if I am fearful of what's coming, I'm eliciting a mind body response. That's why we feel our emotions. And that oftentimes sets us into a cycle of distorted perspective, dominates that first part of the brain, and I lose any real sense of direction and grounding. I'm all over the shop because I'm being ruled by my emotions. Then people say, you know what, yeah, it's good that you follow what you feel. Well, that's of the worst advice anybody could ever give, right? The bottom line is what you feel is real, but what you feel is not necessarily a reflection of reality.
It's not true.
That's the point. So I'm
Just
never going to
because you
deny
feel
what you're
it, it
feeling.
doesn't mean to say it's true.
No, that's exactly the point. You
So
feel it
feelings are not
100%.
facts.
100%. And when I recognize that a feeling is a modulator of perspective, in other words, it can inflate things, distort things, diminish things,
Through the
I'm
limbic
going to
system.
see, now I'm potentially in real trouble because that guy who cut me off on the road, I feel I need to punish to protect other people. So I pull him over and smash him with my golf club.
That's a
That's
South African or Dubai
very
thing.
much
That's not a
right. No,
Scottish thing.
not so much Dubai, right? But the point is this: is the person acted from their perspective completely logically. When they look back at it, they're like, I can't believe I did that. Well, in that moment, you did what you thought was best. And that's why, for example, regulating emotion is so important. I need to understand what my emotions are, if they're valid or not. right? Is this a reasonable emotion? Just because it's yours doesn't mean it's valid. Doesn't mean it's reasonable that you can have your emotions. And here's the deal. Again, I'm not your judge. I say this to every single person I see. Not your judge, and not here to tell you how to live your life. I'm hopefully going to give you some insights that you understand yourself and other people in your situation so that you can make better sense, make better decisions, and have the self control to put those decisions into action consistently enough to get to where you think you're going to find satisfaction. That's pretty much the long and the short of it. In a corporate setting, in a personal setting, in a family setting, right? It's a lot of fun. We're privileged to work in the area we work in, Cuddy.
I do. I love it. I love it. And it is about those. I suppose it's because of the eye-opening moments that I had when I was going through something, and I thought,
And me.
and I don't. This is probably an Oprah Winfrey thing, but I do remember. Would you rather be right or would you rather be happy? Because they're not mutually exclusive.
And I would say this to you. If in many respects one's looking at that and recognizes that I am right, okay, but to enforce that or inflict that on somebody else right now is going to create a tension in relationship, which is not worth the cost. I'm willing to keep quiet. Doesn't mean I have to change my belief.
See,
It just means that I recognize that forcing what I believe is right onto somebody else right now may cause more damage than it does help. That doesn't mean I have to agree with what they're saying. Doesn't mean that I even need to acknowledge that their belief is valid.
yeah,
I simply need to say, you as an individual of value are fully entitled to your belief, and I respect that entitlement. Doesn't mean that if I disagree with you, I somehow think you're bad or anything else. It just means I don't think that's reality. And that's the beauty of being able to interact with people, recognizing where we grew up, how we grew up, what our experiences were. We are not going to have the same perspective. The only time there's ever conflict between any two people is when there's a difference of opinion, a disagreement managed poorly. That's the only time. What basically gives us the opportunity to navigate those kinds of conflicts is simply to say, is there something of equal or greater importance that we can agree on? I
yes,
agree that I would like to show you respect. I don't have to make out as though what you believe is right in order to do that. And I don't have to be, you know, ridiculous about it. I can simply say, I respect you and I respect that you are free to hold a position. That doesn't mean I need to necessarily, again, respect the position itself. But I'm not going to treat you badly because we have a difference.
and that comes back to emotional intelligence, doesn't it?
100%.
And it's funny because I did a positive emotional intelligence thing, which was PQ, and which was I've actually got a course on it, how you can increase your positive emotional. So getting back out of the fear-based into the sage mind,
Mm-hmm.
which is the calm, which is the rest and the digest. I do a lot of things on LinkedIn about those kind of things. I do a lot on my LinkedIn posts from in cold water because I'm
Okay.
like, yeah, I do a lot of you can't do cold water therapy as much as I can because I'm in Scotland and you're in Dubai.
True story.
So I know
Yeah.
what the water's like in Dubai. It's like a hot bath. So what
True.
what kind of changes? And I know we kind of touched on this before, and I know we're going to be wrapping up towards the end here and things like that. What's the final legacy that you want to leave behind, Dr. Penny?
Well, there are a couple of ways of interpreting that. I will say this to you. I'm not fazed by my legacy. I must be quite honest with you. I live for today and I live according to this particular principle: live now well. And the idea there is if I do that, and I do that genuinely, meaningfully, with good intention to try and take care and help the people I'm called to help with, and take care of the people I'm responsible for. The probability is if there's anything legacy worthy, it will end up being there. It's not something I'm going to chase. What I will try and do is whatever I've learned from the past, comfortable, uncomfortable, whatever it might be, I'm going to try and take something that allows me in the moment to be clear in my thinking, focused on the present, heading in a direction that I think is going to be good, mindful that the uncertainty of the future is not a reason to think worst case scenario, but to say, I'm going to think it possibly could be good, and I'm going to head in that direction with the limitations I have, with the skills that I have, the potential I have, and I'm going to do that for as long as I have life to do that. And again, if that's good enough to contribute to some sort of legacy, great. If not, Well, I'm thankful to say I'm content with that process.
That's beautiful. This is everything the Mind Management Mentors podcast is all about.
It's been delightful. I hope I didn't speak too much. I get
No,
excited about it.
we do, right? Whenever I get invited, it's funny. I got invited on somebody else's podcast, and he was like, "You don't shut up." I'm like, "No," because these things that people need to know that they don't actually have to live with,
Yeah,
and there can be some easy changes that actually can start changing that perspectives and start giving
completely
people
agree with you.
choice. Because the second you realize, I didn't realize I had choice way back in the day. And the second I realized I had choice, then I realized I'd got options. And the second
Yeah,
you realize you've got options, you realize we don't have to stay where we are. And that's a
100%.
really powerful concept. And if anything explains this podcast, this is one of them. Dr. Penny, I don't think this is going to be the last time you're going to be on the podcast,
I hope
depending on your
not. I hope that
schedule.
we can do this again. I've appreciated it, Cuddy. I really have. I appreciate the way you handled that. I appreciated, the sort of the backward and forward we can have. I really do, and I wish you all of the best, really, with what you're doing.
We're getting there. I think we're up to
Yeah,
about 35,000 subscribers at the moment. So,
awesome.
yeah, that the aim is to keep moving forward and getting those guests such as yourself that have something to be able to add to the world that people can take away for absolutely free. Um, and I'm a big believer in connections, and I use the podcast to make connections with other people. We wouldn't have known each other. You're in Dubai, I'm in Scotland. Now we've made
Yep,
this connection.
yep,
And now it's a really powerful way for coaches to go, well, actually, how can I make connections in Australia and Dubai? Get them on your podcast. It's
love
such
it.
a powerful way. It really is. Dr. Penny, thank you so much. To everybody that's watching this, this is one of the longer podcasts that we've done, actually. Like and subscribe if you're liking the content. Give us some comments. Tell us what you want to see from the Mind Management Mentors podcast. But just remember, if it's in the mind, it can be managed. And as always, big love from Cuddy, and we'll see you on the next episode of the Mind Management Mentors podcast.
Thank you for having me.